Welcome to the very first episode of the only AI podcast you'll ever need. I'm Hansel, and wow, I'm excited to finally get this thing going.
I'm Gretel, and yeah, I gotta say I'm pretty pumped myself.
Feels like we've been talking about doing this forever, and now we're here ready to dive deep into the world of tech.
Absolutely. And for our first deep dive, we are launching a new series. We're calling it The Financial Cookie.
Sounds delicious.
We'll be taking a bite out of the financials of some really interesting tech companies right here in the U.S. market.
Now, before we go any further,
Yeah.
got to get the disclaimer out of the way. This is not financial advice. Think of this more like two friends geeking out over balance sheets and income statements.
Yeah, exactly. Just trying to make sense of it all, and share what we find interesting.
Right. We want to spark your interest, get you thinking critically, but ultimately you should always do your own research before making any investment decisions.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so disclaimer done. Let's dive into our very first financial cookie, BigBearAI, an AI-powered decision intelligence company.
Publicly traded on the NYSE under the ticker symbol BBAI.
And they just released their Q3 2024 report, which makes for a pretty interesting read because right off the bat we see this huge 22.1% revenue increase.
Hitting $41.5 million compared to the same quarter last year.
Sounds like they're killing it, right? But then you look at the net loss, and it's actually increased to $12.2 million.
Yeah, how does that even make sense?
Seriously, with revenue growing like that.
That's the question, isn't it? Really highlights why we can't just skim the headlines. We got to dig deeper into the details.
For sure, yeah.
Like, for example, there's this one line item in the report that really caught my eye, a decreased benefit from changes in the fair value of warrants.
Okay, so in plain English, what does that even mean?
Basically, BigBear.ai had this $15.7 million benefit from these warrants back in Q3 2023.
Okay.
This time around, it was only $1.3 million. While it's not an actual cash loss, it really impacts the overall picture of their profitability.
So that 22.1% revenue growth suddenly doesn't look quite as impressive.
Right. Makes you realize how important it is to understand all those little details in these financial reports and not just get caught up in the big numbers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is where things get really interesting because they also reported a positive non-GAAP adjusted EBITDA of $0.9 million, which is up from $0.2 million in the same quarter last year. So is that a good sign or not?
That is a great question. I'm honestly a little torn on that one.
Yeah, me too.
It seems like a positive step, but how much weight can we really give it when they're still reporting a net loss overall?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's important to understand what's driving that EBITDA improvement.
Right. So their gross margins got better, meaning they're making more profit on each dollar of revenue.
Okay.
And they've been actively managing costs to try and keep expenses down. But are these sustainable strategies?
Well, that's what we're here to find out. But before we get lost in all the numbers, let's shift gears for a bit and talk about something a bit more tangible. Military contracts.
Okay.
BigBear.ai is heavily involved in the defense sector, and they just landed a massive win with the U.S. Army.
Oh, you're talking about that 5-year, $165.15 million sole source contract for GFIM production services? Yeah, that's a pretty big deal.
GFIM, for those of us who don't speak military acronym, break that down for us.
It stands for Global Force Information.
Okay.
And essentially, it's about bringing intelligent automation to the way the Army manages its personnel. So they're replacing 15 old systems with this one powerful platform.
15 systems. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
You're talking about streamlining a huge amount of data.
Yeah.
No wonder they went with BigBear.ai for this. But that brings up a question I'm sure a lot of our listeners are wondering. How much are they relying on these government contracts? Is that their bread and butter?
It's definitely a significant part of their revenue stream, but they're not putting all their eggs in one basket. They're involved in another huge potential contract with the FAA as a subcontractor.
That one you mentioned is worth a potential $2.4 billion over 10 years. That's a lot of potential cookies. But being a subcontractor makes me wonder how much of that will actually flow to BigBear.ai.
It's hard to say without seeing the specifics of the arrangement, but it does show that they're not just relying on the government. They're trying to diversify.
Right, right. And speaking of diversification, they've also been making moves in other sectors like biometric boarding at Denver International Airport, and they've been showcasing their Conductor OS AI platform in some U.S. Navy exercises.
Yeah, those are smaller contracts for sure, but they do point to BigBear.ai's potential to play in a lot of different sectors.
Okay, so we've covered the highlights, the revenue growth, the impressive contracts, and the efforts to diversify. But now let's get our hands a little dirty and actually take a look at the financials. What are some key things you as a listener should be looking for when you dive into these reports?
Well, remember, we're just giving you a taste here. The real learning comes from you exploring the details yourself.
Absolutely. Think of it like a treasure hunt. We're giving you the map, but you get to discover the gold.
Exactly. So let's start with gross margin. We talked about how it improved, but why? What's driving that improvement? What does it tell us about BigBear.ai's ability to actually generate profit?
Then there's the operating expenses they increased, despite all those cost management efforts we talk about. Seems a bit counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It does. So if they're trying to manage costs, why are those expenses still going up? This is where you really need to dig in and look at the specific at what exactly is driving that increase. Are they investing in R&D?
Hmm.
Expanding their sales force?
Sure.
Acquiring new talent?
Good point, because sometimes you have to spend money to make money, right? But it needs to be smart.
Exactly.
Okay, what else should our listeners be looking at?
Next up, backlog. BigBear.ai reported a $437 million ending backlog.
Okay.
But how much of that is guaranteed revenue? How does that connect to future revenue projections? Because having a huge backlog doesn't really mean much if those contracts never actually turn into cash.
And speaking of cash flow, that's another crucial piece of the puzzle. Their cash balance actually decreased despite the revenue growth.
Yeah.
Why is that? What's going on with their cash management?
Right, because even if you have revenue coming in, if you're not managing your cash flow effectively, it could signal problems down the road.
So we need to be detectives here, following the money trail
Right.
and trying to understand the story behind the numbers.
Exactly. And remember, every company has risks. So before you get too excited about Big Bear AI's potential, take a look at those forward-looking statements you find in their reports. They highlight some key risks. Things like government funding uncertainties, competition for contracts, integration of acquired businesses, and market acceptance of new products.
So it's all about weighing the potential rewards against the potential risks.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to do your own research and not just rely on what we're saying.
Okay, I think we've given our listeners plenty to think about for now. You know, it's fascinating to me how BigBear.ai's story really reflects some of the broader trends we're seeing in the AI industry as a whole. This incredible demand for AI solutions everywhere. Governments, businesses, everyone's trying to figure out how to use AI to get ahead. And we see that reflected in BigBear.ai's strong revenue growth, those big military contracts.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like the AI gold rush is on and everybody's scrambling to stake their claim.
Exactly. Yeah. But at the same time, there's this pressure to show that it's not all just hype. You know, investors want to see these AI companies turn that innovation into actual sustainable profit.
Yeah, and that's where things get tricky because developing this cutting edge AI tech takes a ton of money.
You need the best people, constant R&D, the infrastructure to support it all. It adds up fast.
And then you got to scale your operations to meet that growing demand. So it's a real balancing act, trying to invest for the future, but also show profitability right now.
No wonder we're seeing those mixed signals in BigBear.ai's financials. It's like they're trying to sprint a marathon.
That's a perfect analogy, and it's something to keep in mind when you're looking at any AI company. It's a young industry, a lot of volatility, no guarantee of overnight success.
So what does all this mean for someone who's interested in AI, but maybe not quite ready to jump into the stock market?
Well, it's important to realize that AI isn't just some futuristic concept anymore. It's already impacting our lives in ways you might not even realize.
Give us some examples.
Think about the recommendations you get on streaming services, the personalized ads you see online, even the spam filters that keep our inboxes clean. AI is behind all of that. And then there are the more advanced applications in healthcare, transportation, finance. The list goes on and on.
So it's like AI is this invisible force that's shaping so much of our world.
Exactly. And as this technology continues to evolve, that impact is only going to get bigger. So whether you're a tech enthusiast or just curious about the future, it's worth paying attention to what's happening.
Okay, so we've talked big picture trends, the financial puzzle, but let's go back to something you mentioned earlier. The human element, BigBear.ai, is all about using AI to augment human decision-making, not replace it. What's the thinking behind that?
I think that's a crucial point. BigBear.ai's philosophy is all about using AI to enhance human capabilities to help us make better decisions faster with more information.
So AI as a tool, not a replacement.
Precisely, think of it like the superpowered assistant that can analyze mountains of data spot patterns we might miss, offer insights that would take us humans forever to figure out.
But ultimately, it's still humans making the final call.
Absolutely. The human element is still crucial, especially when it comes to ethics. Complex judgment calls, situations that require intuition and empathy, things that AI just can't replicate.
So it's a partnership, a collaboration between human and machine each bringing their strengths to the table.
Exactly. And that's what makes BigBearAI's approach so interesting. They're building systems that actually empower humans to make a real difference.
Okay, I get the big idea. But all this talk about algorithms and data can feel a bit abstract. Can you give us a concrete example of how BigBearAI's tech is actually being used in the real world?
Absolutely. Let's go back to that military contract we were talking about, the one for GFI. That's a perfect example.
Yeah.
BigBear.ai is using their AI to help the Army manage its global workforce more effectively.
Okay, break that down for us. What does that actually look like in practice?
So imagine you're in charge of deploying thousands of soldiers across multiple continents. You've got to consider their skills, experience, availability, language, proficiency, cultural sensitivities. It's a logistical nightmare.
I can't even imagine, and that's where AI comes in.
Exactly. BigBear.ai's AI can analyze all that data, the soldiers' profiles, the mission requirements, everything, and recommend the best possible deployment strategies.
So it's like a superpowered matchmaker for the Army.
You got it. And this kind of AI-powered support can be a real game changer. You know, it helps them optimize their resources, improve efficiency, and ultimately keep their soldiers safer.
That's pretty amazing, and I imagine this is just one example of how their tech is being applied. There must be countless others.
Yeah, absolutely. As their technology evolves and they expand into new markets, we can expect to see even more creative applications of their AI solutions.
Okay, so we've established that they're doing some really impressive things, but let's be real, they're not the only player in this game. What about the competition? Who else is out there?
That's a great question. The AI landscape is getting more competitive every single day, with both those big tech companies and those more agile startups joining the race.
So who are the giants that BigBear.ai needs to watch out for?
Well, you've got the usual suspects: Google, Microsoft, Amazon, IBM. These companies have massive resources, deep AI expertise. They're pouring money into research, buying up promising startups, building powerful AI platforms.
So it's like David versus Goliath with BigBear.ai taking on these tech titans.
Well, it's not quite that simple, because you also have all these specialized AI companies popping up, each one focusing on a specific niche: healthcare, finance, cybersecurity, you name it.
So it's more like a multi-dimensional chess match with everyone trying to outmaneuver each other in this rapidly changing landscape.
Exactly. And to succeed, BigBear.ai needs to play to their strengths.
Yeah.
They've got a proven track record in defense and intelligence, a reputation for delivering in high-pressure situations.
So leverage those strengths, but also expand their capabilities and venture into new markets.
Precisely find that sweet spot between specialization and diversification.
Okay, I'm starting to see the strategic challenges here, but let's shift gears again for a moment and talk about something that's on everyone's mind: the human side of AI. BigBear.ai emphasizes that their AI is designed to augment human decision-making, not replace it. What are your thoughts on that approach?
Well, I think it's an approach that recognizes the unique capabilities of both humans and AI. Excels at processing massive amounts of data and identifying patterns, but humans bring critical thinking, creativity, empathy, ethical judgment to the table.
So it's not about humans versus machines, it's about finding ways for them to work together more effectively.
Exactly. AI can provide us with powerful tools and insights, but ultimately it's up to us to use them wisely and ethically.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here, but I have to admit, I'm curious about BigBear.ai's journey. As a company, they haven't always been this publicly traded AI powerhouse, right? Where did it all begin?
To really understand BigBear.ai's roots, you got to go back to 2014, Columbia, Maryland. That's where a group of entrepreneurs with this shared passion for AI came together.
So they were pioneers, venturing into uncharted territory. What was the AI landscape like back then?
It was a totally different world. AI was mostly confined to research labs, universities. The idea of using AI to power business decisions or personalize our digital experiences, that was still pretty far out there for most people.
So these entrepreneurs were ahead of the curve. They were betting on a future that most people couldn't even imagine.
Exactly. They saw the potential of AI before it was obvious, and they had the courage to invest their time and resources into building a company that would push those boundaries.
What were those early days like? I imagine it wasn't all smooth sailing.
Oh, I'm sure there were plenty of bumps in the road. Starting any business is tough, but building a company around a cutting-edge tech like AI, that's next level challenging.
So what were some of the biggest hurdles they had to overcome?
Well, for one, they had to convince people that AI wasn't just hype. They had to prove that their solutions had real-world value, and they had to do it at a time when most people were still pretty skeptical.
So they were educating the market as they were trying to sell to it.
Exactly. And then there were the technical challenges. AI was still in its early stages. They had to build a lot of their tools and infrastructure from scratch.
Wow, so they were truly explorers forging their own path.
That's a great way to put it. And like any pioneering endeavor, there were setbacks, experiments that failed, algorithms that didn't quite work, partnerships that fell through. It's all part of the process.
So they had to be resilient, learn from those mistakes, keep iterating.
Absolutely. And that's what distinguishes the successful entrepreneurs. They have this unwavering belief in their vision, and they're willing to push through the adversity.
So how do they go from this small startup in Maryland to being listed on the New York Stock Exchange? That's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, it really speaks to their hard work, their innovation, and their ability to attract talent, secure funding. They initially focused on defense and intelligence, where their AI solutions could make a real impact in these high-stakes scenarios.
So they targeted a niche market where their expertise could really shine.
Exactly, and they built this solid reputation for delivering results. Their AI systems helped intelligence agencies analyze these huge data sets, identify patterns, make better decisions, contributing to national security.
That's impressive, and those early successes paved the way for their growth.
Absolutely. As their reputation grew, so did their client base. They landed bigger, more complex contracts, and they started attracting interest from investors outside of just defense and intelligence.
So they were gaining momentum, proving their AI solutions had broader applications.
Exactly. And in 2021, they took the leap and went public.
Going public is a big step. What prompted that decision?
It's a way for companies to access more capital, raise funds to fuel growth, invest in new technologies and acquisitions.
Like leveling up, opening new doors for expansion and innovation.
Precisely. And for BigBear.ai, it signaled that they were ready to compete on a larger scale in the AI industry.
It's like they graduated from the startup world to the corporate world, stepping onto a bigger stage with higher stakes.
Exactly. And since then, they've continued to grow, expand their offerings, explore new markets.
But as we discussed earlier, there are challenges ahead, that fierce competition, the need to balance profitability with those future investments.
Right. It's never a straight line to success. There are always ups and downs. And BigBear.ai's story is still being written.
It's a story of ambition, innovation, resilience, and this commitment to making a real difference.
And it's a story we'll be watching closely.
Speaking of watching closely, let's talk about the future, what lies ahead for BigBear.ai.
That's the million-dollar question. AI is constantly evolving, so it's impossible to predict the future with certainty. But we can make some educated guesses based on what we're seeing now and their strategic direction.
So put on your prediction hat. What do you see on the horizon?
Well, one thing's for sure, AI is only going to become more integrated into our lives. We'll see it in more products and services, from healthcare to transportation to entertainment, and BigBear.ai is well positioned to benefit from that.
They're riding a wave that's only getting bigger, but how are they going to stand out in this increasingly crowded market?
Their focus on decision intelligence, I think that's going to be key. They're not just building algorithms, they're building systems to help humans make better, faster, more informed decisions.
Bridging that gap between data and action insights and impact.
Exactly. As more and more organizations struggle with this data overload and decision fatigue, BigBear.ai's solutions are going to become even more valuable.
So decision intelligence, that's one trend to watch. What else is on your radar?
I think we're going to see a growing emphasis on explainable AI, making those algorithms more transparent and understandable to us humans, which is essential for building trust in AI systems and making sure they're used ethically and responsibly.
Because if you can't explain how an AI system made a decision, how can you really trust it?
Exactly. Explainability is critical, especially in sensitive areas like healthcare and criminal justice.
Okay, so decision intelligence, explainable AI, those are key trends. What else do you see for BigBear.ai?
I think they'll continue to branch out into new markets, using their AI and decision-making expertise to address challenges in healthcare, finance, cybersecurity. They've already started dipping their toes in those waters, and I expect that to continue.
So diversification, expansion, new frontiers.
Exactly. And strategic acquisitions wouldn't be surprising to bolster their capabilities in those areas.
Growth, evolution, but also those challenges we talk about, competition, that delicate balance of profitability and investment.
Absolutely. It's a complex landscape, and BigBear.ai's ability to navigate it is going to determine their success.
It's a fascinating story, full of potential, but also uncertainties.
And ultimately, it's up to each individual to decide whether they believe in BigBear.ai's vision and their ability to thrive in the world of AI.
We've given you the information, the insights, the food for thought. Now it's your turn to digest it all and draw your own conclusions.